History 1. This is a scary experience I had when I used to work at Java Joe's. I was an employee there several years ago and worked there for almost 2 years. This happened towards the end of my time working there. One evening I was working a closing shift. We closed at 8 p.m. every night, and generally I would stay a few minutes after finishing tasks. On this night, for the last few hours that we were open, I was working with one other co-worker. Things were pretty quiet for most of the day, but around 6 p.m. it was especially quiet. We had very few customers come in, and during the 7th hour, nobody visited our location. It wasn't even that busy of an area, but a lot of people still went there in the mornings. Usually a few people would come inside and work on their laptops or whatever throughout the afternoon and night. Not this time, though, which I didn't mind. We were able to start cleaning and organizing a bit early, and it became apparent that we probably wouldn't get any more customers for the rest of the night. At maybe 7:45 or so, I told my coworker that she could go home and I would finish up. I knew she was in school and had a lot of homework to do, so she left, and then it was just me. At probably 7:55, I went into the back room. I was doing some of the usual tasks we did when closing. I spent about 2 or 3 minutes in the back room area and then was going to go back out. We had a large swinging door with a small window in it that separated behind the counter from the back room area. As I was about to walk through, though, I noticed something through the window that made me stop. There appeared to be someone behind the counter. This was really strange. I hadn't heard anyone come inside or anything, and it wasn't my coworker. It was a man, and he was somewhat tall, or at least a lot taller than I am. At first it looked like he was wearing a hat, but when he turned a little, I saw that it was a mask, a full ski mask, and he was near the cash register. At that point, I realized that this guy was probably trying to rob us. I quickly moved back from the door and went farther into the back room. I felt like an idiot for not locking the doors and closing early. He entered when I was in the back and didn't even notice. As I walked farther back, I suddenly heard footsteps walking towards the door where I was. We had a decent-sized back area, but there's still not a whole lot of space. Mostly it was filled with various boxes of all sizes and extra supplies such as ingredients and cups. The first thing that I thought to do was find a large box in the back corner. Being the small woman that I am, I jumped inside of it while trying not to make any noise. I'm barely 5 feet tall and fit inside just fine. Then I grabbed another large empty box on the shelf next to me and covered myself with it. However, the man did not immediately enter the back room. I was expecting the door to open the entire time I was getting in the box, but it didn't. I'm not sure what he did, but he remained on the other side of the door for a while. Luckily, I had my phone in my pocket, and I took it out and called the police. Probably 30 seconds after I called, I heard the door to the back room open. I hung up the call with the police prematurely as soon as I heard that. I didn't want the guy to hear everything, even though I had been talking as quietly as I could. All I had been able to say was the Java Joe's location that I was at, and that I thought I was being robbed. The operator was asking me a question when I hung up the phone. I hoped that the police would still come and arrive quickly. When the man entered the back room, he walked in and then seemed to stop. Moments later, I heard him walking closer to me. As he did, he mumbled a few things that I couldn't make out. My heart was racing like crazy, and I hoped that he wouldn't find me. I was hidden pretty well, but it was still a terrifying situation to be in. He got within probably 10 feet of me, and then turned and walked back. A short time later, I heard the door behind the counter open and close again. After that, I didn't hear much. I stayed hidden where I was and didn't dare leave. I texted some friends and family and stayed in the box for maybe 30 minutes. Then I heard more noises coming from inside. Before long, I realized that it was the police. I found out that the guy had left before they got there, unfortunately. I told them everything I could, and we went right behind the counter to check the cash register. He was wearing a ski mask the whole time, so it was impossible to tell his identity. He stole everything that was in the register and then left. After talking with the police, I was finally able to go home. I found out later that the man who robbed the store was caught. I didn't want to work any closing shifts for a while afterward, though. I think I worked there for another month or two before I quit. Sometimes I wonder if the guy was watching the store from outside and saw me go into the back. I really have no idea, though. Either way, it was good timing that I wasn't back there when he entered. I wouldn't want to know what would have happened. History 2. I work at a coffee shop, and I've been there for a little over a year now. Last summer, something crazy happened that I'll never forget. It was a very busy morning, and I had been working since we opened. It was a bit after 8 a.m., and people were coming in and ordering non-stop. There were 5 of us working, trying to keep up with the rush. We were handling it pretty well, I thought. Some customers ordered online and picked up their orders or used services like DoorDash and Uber Eats. Between those and the people ordering in-store, the counter was loaded with drinks. I remember seeing at least 5 drinks and a couple of breakfast sandwiches on the counter. A few people were standing around waiting for their orders. Back then, we didn't have a separate shelf for online orders, so everything just went on the counter. As I put down another drink, I noticed a guy walk in. He had long hair and an unkempt beard. I turned back to my work since we were so busy. A short while later, I added another order to the counter. The man was standing nearby now. About 5 minutes later, I placed another drink on the counter, which had about 6 or 7 items on it at this point. That's when I saw the guy walk up to the counter. At first, I thought he was picking up an online order, but then he used his arm like a brush and knocked everything off the counter. Within seconds, every drink spilled everywhere. It was a mess, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Afterward, the man stepped back and started laughing like a maniac. People around him were giving him dirty looks. Someone asked why he did that, and the place quickly fell silent. He kept laughing as if it was the funniest thing ever. I was angry but knew I couldn't lose my temper. For some reason, I decided to deal with the situation, maybe because I was closest to him. I took a few steps toward the guy, and he looked at me. Before I could say anything, he asked, "What are you going to do about it?" He seemed very proud of what he'd done. I asked him to leave, but he refused. I thought he must be crazy or something. Other people were telling him to leave, and he started defending himself. I went back to help with another order we were finishing up, planning to figure out what needed to be remade. About 30 seconds later, I heard the man moving closer. I looked and saw him jumping over the counter. I walked over and told him to stop. He was now behind the counter where only employees were allowed. I tried to tell him to leave, but he wouldn't listen. He grabbed something off the shelf, a container of caramel or something, and threw it at me. It didn't hurt, but I was scared of what he might do next. He seemed very unpredictable. Someone shouted to call the police, and the man charged at me. He wasn't very big, and I was several inches taller than him. He ran into me, but not with much force. It didn't knock me over. I put my hands up to stop him, and he fell over, crashing into the counter behind us. While he was on the ground, he yelled that he was going to sue me for assaulting him. Many people started leaving the building, and nobody was trying to get coffee anymore. When the man stood back up, I pleaded with him to leave. He refused and tried to charge at me again. I grabbed him by the arms and tried to force him to leave. I walked him out from behind the counter, hearing one of my coworkers say that the police were on their way. As I made it out from behind the counter, the man broke free from me. I wasn't going to tackle him or anything, so he ran over to a table and stood behind it. All my coworkers and customers had left the building. The police arrived about 2 minutes later, and we let them handle it. They got the man out and left the building. We ended up closing for the next hour and finally opened a while later. That was by far the craziest thing that has ever happened to me while working there. History 3. I used to work from home and had this routine of walking to Joe's Coffee House every day. There was a Joe's Coffee House I could walk to, and it took about 20 minutes to get there. So I'd wake up and then make the walk to Joe's, grab my coffee, and head back before starting work. It was a good way to get my steps in and enjoy my morning brew. I did this almost daily for a good 2 or 3 months until something happened that made me stop. One regular weekday, I left my house at 7 a.m. for my usual walk to Joe's. The walk there was fine. I took the sidewalks the entire way, and most of the roads were pretty quiet except for the 2 roads closest to Joe's, which were a bit busier. After I got my coffee, I waited inside until it was ready. Joe's was somewhat busy since it was morning, so I browsed my phone while I waited. Once my coffee was ready, I took it and started the walk back home. When I was about halfway home, I was walking on the left side of the road on the sidewalk. The street was a quiet residential one, with a mix of apartment buildings and houses. As I walked, a car came down the street in the same direction I was going. It slowed down and I expected it to pass me, but it didn't. It was an old gray sedan. I'm not much of a car person, so I couldn't tell the exact make or model, but it looked pretty old. The car was going at about the same speed as I was walking, which made me a bit nervous. After about 30 seconds of this, the car started to pull over to the side of the road in front of me. I wanted to get away, so I turned down a sidewalk that went between two apartment buildings to my left. The car couldn't follow me down there, and I hoped the driver wouldn't get out and come after me. I walked a good distance down the sidewalk and didn't hear anyone behind me. After a while, I went back, and the car was gone. The next few days, I continued my morning walks to Joe's, trying not to let that one incident bother me. I didn't even think about not going. But about a week later, I saw the car again. It was almost the exact same situation. I was on the same sidewalk, on the same street, and there was the gray sedan again, slowly driving past me. I thought, not this again, and sped up my walking pace. The car matched my speed. I glanced over to see who was driving but couldn't make out anything from my angle. When I got to the same sidewalk between buildings, I went down it again. I walked nearly all the way down and then turned back, hoping the car would be gone like before. But when I reached the corner, the car was still there, parked on the side of the road. I didn't see anyone around it, but I didn't want to take any chances. So I went back down the sidewalk and took a different route home. It took longer, but I didn't see the car again that day. Even after that, I didn't stop walking to Joe's. The next day, I was more careful, taking a different way home to avoid the street where I'd seen the car. I made it back to my house without any problems, but as soon as I got inside and closed the door, I saw the car again. It was driving down my usually quiet street at a very low speed. It didn't stop at my house but kept going. A minute later it came back but passed my house again without stopping. After that I finally decided to stop walking to Joe's. I haven't seen the car since. I have a few theories about who it might have been. Maybe someone from Joe's who saw me multiple times or just a random person. They must have followed me to my street but didn't know which house was mine. I feel lucky nothing bad happened.